Good evening. I'm Dennis Sanquist, Director of Planning and Development for McHenry County. I'm privileged and honored to welcome you to our 4th Annual Water Forum. Last year we had to skip the forum, and this year we're holding the forum online. Hopefully we'll be able to resume conducting the forums in person next year. In the meantime, this year all of our speakers are being pre-recorded, which will allow us to enjoy high-quality, visually engaging presentations from the comforts of our home. All speakers are also present online this evening for live discussion and question and answer sessions with forum participants. The Water Forum would not be possible without our great partners and sponsors. Our co-host is the Environmental Defenders of McHenry County, who you all know as the leading nonprofit organization with dedicated volunteers working hard to make McHenry County a healthier, safer, and happier place. From the beginning, the Defenders have supported the Water Forums by serving as the fiscal agent, assisting with planning, and providing technical support and volunteers. Our platinum level sponsor is the Heartland Realtors Association, which is a member-driven, not-for-profit trade association which provides placemaking grants for great projects. Their continued support for this year's forum provided funding for the videographer to film all the great presentations that we'll be seeing this evening. Our gold level sponsors include 3 great local engineering and ecological consulting firms: Engineering Enterprises, Inc., Baxter & Woodman Consulting Engineers, and Hay & Associates, Inc. Each of these firms has demonstrated its expertise and commitment to supporting water resources and ecological preservation and restoration through involvement in many projects in McHenry County and throughout the region. Our silver level sponsors include our government water resource planning and protection partners: the Illinois State Water Survey, U.S. Geological Survey, the McHenry County Conservation District, and the McHenry Lake Soil and Water Conservation District and Natural Resources Conservation Service. The ISWS and the USGS are the premier state and federal agencies for water resources scientific expertise and studies. One of tonight's featured speakers is from the USGS, while the ISWS has been helping us understand our water resources for over a decade. Our entire water resources planning and protection program is based on the information and data provided by these 2 agencies. MCCD, the SWCD, and NRCS are all great partners in helping protect our water resources. MCCD's natural areas provide groundwater recharge, flood reduction, and water quality treatment. District properties also provide locations for many of the groundwater monitoring well that will be discussed this evening. The state SWCD and federal NRCS work collaboratively to help agricultural landowners and operators implement conservation practices that protect our water and natural resources. Our final silver level sponsor is the Land Conservancy of McHenry County, who you all know as another of our leading local nonprofit organizations, which plays a vital role in helping to protect our remaining natural areas and habitat in the county. The Land Conservancy helps to ensure that these natural habitats will be available for future generations. I'd also like to thank David Bradburn and Fork the Band Productions for professionally recording and editing this evening's presentations, and Duke's Ale House and Kitchen, 1776 Restaurant, and Fork It Foods and Grazing for participating in the Water Forum and contributing to great local food production. The first 100 persons who registered and attended this evening's Water Forum will be receiving a gift certificate to enjoy delicious dining at one of these locations. And with that exciting news, I invite you all to sit back, enjoy this evening's Water Forum. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We really have gotten a great turnout, so this really shows that there is strong interest in the subject, and it is an important subject. Many of you may remember that 2 years ago, our topic for the Water Forum was flooding. And the night of the event, in the middle of it, we had a tornado warning, and then we had record flooding that night. Here we are 2 years later, and we're going into a severe drought into the summer. So we're entering a period of very severe extremes, and that is going to affect how we use and protect our water resources. There are also a human-induced catastrophe that's going on right next door with the plant fire, and that indicates the potential for danger. If that had happened in Crystal Lake, that theoretically would have polluted Crystal Lake itself and permanently contaminated their groundwater aquifer. So these issues have very, very real impacts. And so it's important for us to understand our water resources and understand how we protect them. And that's really what the Water Resources Action Plan that was recently developed was all about. So we'll be talking more about our water resources and the Water Resources Action Plan throughout the evening. So we're very grateful to have you here, and we'll go on with the first presentation, which covers McHenry County Water Resources and the Water Resources Action Plan. Thank you.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Scott Kuykendall, and I'm the Water Resources Specialist for McHenry County. I help oversee our scientific research on water resource issues. I help set public policy. I help maintain our environmental compliance with the IEPA, and then I do public education and outreach like this. In McHenry County, we have very great water resources. What we have here is really pretty special, and it deserves to be protected. We have developed a water resources action plan to help communities and residents and others to protect our water resources, and so we'll be talking about that tonight. Our outline for the presentation tonight is we'll start out talking about water resources in general, then we'll start narrowing in and talking about water resources specific to McHenry County. We'll then go over the parts of the Water Resources Action Plan. The presentation is about 30 minutes long, and then we'll have a question and answer period afterwards. So we've got a lot to cover, so we'll go ahead and get started. So we live on a blue planet where most of the planet is covered with water. However, most of that water is salt water, oceans. Only about 2.5% of the water on the planet, that includes all the water in the atmosphere, on the ground, and in the earth, is fresh water. And most of that fresh water is ice. So about 70% of our fresh water is locked up in the ice caps. And as that melts, it goes down into the oceans and becomes salt water. Most of the remaining fresh water is actually inaccessible. It's either too deep, it's in the atmosphere, or it's not clean enough to use. So really only about 0.007% of all the water on the planet is available for us to use. And we have to share that water with a lot of other species and a lot of other people. So there's currently about 7 billion people on the planet. When my parents were born, there's about 2.4 billion people on the planet. Within their single lifetime, we've gone from 2.4 billion people to over 7 billion people, and we're rapidly approaching 9 billion people on the planet, all needing to share that 0.007% of water fresh water on the planet. And unfortunately, our actions are adversely impacting that 0.007%. And water is necessary for all living things, whether you live in the Arctic, the tropics, or the Midwest. Water is necessary for all life. And because water is necessary for all life, it's also necessary for all economic development. People are not going to invest in homes or businesses if they don't have access to safe, clean, reliable, and affordable water resources. And water is scarce in much of the planet. It's estimated by 2025 that 2/3 of the world's population will live under water stress, and almost 2 billion people will live in absolute water scarcity. That means from one day to the next, almost 2 billion people will have no idea if they're going to have access to water that day. Fortunately, here in McHenry County, we do have safe, sustainable supplies of water, but that's only true if we protect them. So this is a map of distribution of water in Illinois. We get most of our drinking water from groundwater, lakes, rivers, and reservoirs. You can see up in the northeast corner of the state that we've got a lot more water compared to the rest of the state down south. Most of the water up in that northeast corner is water drawn from Lake Michigan, shown in blue. You'll also see a lot of brown in that area, and that's water that's drawn from groundwater resources. Throughout the rest of the state, most of the blue areas that you see are reservoirs. So those are man-made water bodies that were created by damming up rivers or streams. And without those impoundments, much of southern Illinois, or much of the rest of Illinois, will look pretty dry compared to the northeast corner. So this is a map closing in on the Chicagoland region. Once again, the areas shown in blue are communities that get their water from Lake Michigan. You've got various shades of brown, and those are communities that get their water from groundwater resources. And then there are communities that get their water from the Fox River, or a combination of Fox River and groundwater. And so we've got a variety of sources. One thing to point out, though, is that most of the collar counties around Chicago up into the 80s were actually on groundwater too. It was only from the 80s on that most of the communities around Chicago converted to Lake Michigan water. And if anything ever happens to Lake Michigan, it'll be very difficult for them to go back into groundwater now. So it's imperative that we take care of Lake Michigan as a resource for the betterment of everybody in the region. This is a cross-sectional view of our subsurface geology and aquifers. So the uppermost layer is a layer of sand and gravel. This is material that was brought in as the glaciers came down and receded. So they brought with them silts, sediments, and a lot of sand and gravel. So when it rains or snow melts, water is able to infiltrate down through the sand and gravel layer, fill the pore spaces between the sand and gravel particles, and create a water table. We're then able to drill down below that water table to use water for our own use. Below the sand and gravel layer is a layer of limestone or dolomite. And this is hard, rigid rock that doesn't hold water by itself. But there are cracks and fissures in the limestone, and water is able to infiltrate down through the sand and gravel, fill the voids and cracks and fissures in the limestone, and then we can drill down and use that as our aquifer. Below that are layers of sandstone. We've got 3 different sandstone aquifers. The uppermost one is a St. Peter's aquifer, and the area that we get water from in that St. Peter's is recharged largely in western McHenry County, where the impermeable layers get thin enough so water can pass through down into that St. Peter sandstone, or in Boone County, where they have what are called deep bedrock valleys that go from the land surface all the way down to the sandstone, so water is able to infiltrate down and recharge the St. Peter's. The main aquifer that we use in the deep bedrock is the Ironton-Galesville, and that's actually recharged up in north central Wisconsin, so it can take 1,000 or thousands of years for a molecule of water to hit the ground up there, infiltrate down to the water table, and then make its way towards us. So if we're taking water out faster than it's coming towards us, the water table drops. And then we've got the Mount Simon aquifer, which is the lowest sandstone aquifer in our area. It's not used readily for water, potable water, because it's very saline. But there may be opportunities for using that for drinking water in some parts of the state, including underneath McHenry County, where the layer of fresh water is a bit thicker. It's not a great resource, but it's something that may be considered in the future. These are maps showing the distribution of our different aquifers in the state. And once again, you can see up in northern Illinois and northeastern Illinois specifically, we have access to multiple aquifers that the rest of the state does not have. So we really are very fortunate to have these resources. This is a close-up view of McHenry County. So it's showing the different sources of water for different communities in McHenry County. The dark brown communities are communities that rely solely on deep bedrock aquifers. The light-colored areas are communities that rely solely on sand and gravel aquifers, and then the medium yellowish color are areas that rely on a combination of deep and shallow aquifers. So this is a map showing the extent of the sandstone aquifers in the Midwest, and I show where the recharge area for the Ironton-Galesville is in McHenry County. So once again, if water is being taken out faster than it's coming down towards us, the water table drops, and that is exactly what's happening. So this is a map showing the sandstone aquifer and the desaturated areas in the region. So the area shown in the darkest red are areas in Will County and Joliet, where they have dropped the water table by over 800 feet. That creates what's called a cone of depression. So it drops the water table, and that water table drop goes out in a cone shape, and that cone shape extends underneath McHenry County. So the desaturation in Joliet area is actually affecting us up in southeast corner of McHenry County too. Joliet is actually running out of water and is in the process of building a pipeline to take water from Lake Michigan all the way out to Joliet. So it's going to cost about $1 billion to create it, about $1 billion to operate it, and people's water bills are going to go from about $30 a month to over $100 a month. So these are very real issues, and we need to be very careful not to overdraw our water supplies. And these are maps that were put together from the Illinois State Water Survey, and they show areas in McHenry County that are at risk. So the yellowish colors are areas that are at risk, and the dark red is forecasted out into 2050. If we continue on the same track, then we are going to have hotspots that are in greater danger of not being able to meet their water supply with the sandstone aquifers. And Daniel Abrams is with the Illinois State Water Survey, and he's their lead modeler who's been working on the deep aquifers for Will County, and he'll be giving a presentation later this evening, and he'll go into greater detail on the study. So since we can't keep taking more and more water out of the deep bedrock aquifer, we're going to have to rely more and more on our sand and gravel aquifers. And this is a profile view showing what sand and gravel aquifers might look like. It is not a uniform layer of sand and gravel across the county. It is a hodgepodge of materials that were brought down as the glaciers came down and receded, came down and receded. So Jason Thomason with the Illinois State Geological Survey has described it to me as being a beautiful, complicated mess. And it is a very complex area. You can't just look at the ground level and understand what's going on. So we've done a lot of studies to better understand what's going on underground. We may have areas that have multiple sand and gravel aquifers. And so this shows the different types of aquifers we may have. And you can also see that there are layers of material between some of those aquifers. Those are referred to as aquitards. So they may be silts and clays that limit water's ability to infiltrate downward. And so those areas may have slower recharge, but those areas may also limit the amount of pollutants that can come down. So Amy Gahala is with the U.S. Geological Survey, and she will be talking more about our sand and gravel aquifers in her presentation this evening. So just like we can desaturate our deep sandstone aquifers, we can also desaturate our sand and gravel aquifers. So these are maps from a study that the Illinois State Water Survey did for the state, for McHenry County, and it shows areas that have been desaturated in McHenry County. So the left panel is showing desaturation in 2009. And this is for the Ashmore aquifer, which is the middle aquifer on the previous panel. And if we continue the way we're going, by 2050, the desaturation will be even greater, especially in the Woodstock area. So we need to be very careful not to desaturate both our deep aquifers and our shallow aquifers. And so all of our water bodies and our land uses are interconnected. So all of our groundwater aquifers, whether the sand and gravel aquifers, the limestone aquifers, or the sandstone aquifers, are interconnected with our water resources, whether they're lakes, rivers, streams, or wetlands. And those are interconnected with our natural areas, whether they're savanna, prairie, wetland, and those are interconnected with our built environment. So whether there are charming towns or our productive farms or our fun festivities, all of these things are hydrologically connected. So this is an animated slide showing natural hydrology. So when it rains or snow melts, water infiltrates down through the ground and recharges our water table. But it's not just moving downward, it's also moving sideways. So in a matter of days, weeks, months, years, or decades, that water is moving down and sideways and providing a base flow of cool, clean water to our lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands. And so it's just a constant flow of groundwater that's maintaining that water level. In a urbanized area where we've paved over the ground, water is no longer able to infiltrate down. So it hits the ground surface and rushes off, carrying with it any pollutants that it comes in contact with along the way. So basically anything we put into the air or onto the land can be collected by stormwater as it moves down. And it rushes down to our lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands with hot, dirty water, creating a flood stage, followed by drought, flood, drought, flood, drought. So we've created very extreme hydrologic situations as opposed to a natural base flow of cool, clean water coming through natural hydrology. And so what we really are trying to do now is we're trying to restore that natural hydrology to our built environment, to put water back into the ground and maintain that base flow to our natural water bodies. So our water resources are vulnerable to a wide variety of threats. The four main ones we look at are overconsumption. So if we're taking more water out than is naturally being recharged, and then the water table drops down. If we pave over everything, water is no longer able to infiltrate down and recharge our water table. And then drought. During periods of drought, we're not getting the recharge. So water keeps drawing down further and further. And one of the ironic or sad things is that during periods of drought, we actually accelerate our water use. Whether it's for watering lawns or irrigating crops, we can use up to 50% more water during periods of drought than during normal times. And then pollution. Like I said, anything we put into the air, onto the land, or even into the ground can be sources of pollution for our water resources. Fortunately, McHenry County has done more to understand and protect our water resources than any other county in the state. We have been an absolute leader in water resources, and that's one of the main reasons I took this job, is because we take water seriously, and we've done a good job researching and protecting our water resources. So starting in 2006, we did our first major study of water resources with our Groundwater Resources Management Plan. And so this looked at both our water supplies and demands that were currently there, and then future demands. The study identified potential for groundwater depletion and groundwater contamination. And at that time, we were experiencing explosive growth. So there was very big concern that we wouldn't have enough water to support that growth. And that's still an issue. Even though we've had this downturn, we fully expect population growth and development to continue on into the future. This has just kind of been a blip in our growth. So the county board was very concerned about the groundwater management plan and asked for a second plan to be done. So whereas the first one focused on the problems, the Water Resources Action Plan focuses on solutions. And a lot of really great things came out of this original Water Resources Action Plan. So one of the first things that was done is we worked with the Illinois State Geological Survey to develop a network of monitoring wells distributed throughout the entire county. So these wells are monitoring water levels in real time. So every 15 minutes, it's taking a water level measurement. It's then transmitting that up to the U.S. Geological Service's satellites, and then they maintain that data for us. Every 10 years, we're going through and monitoring the water quality at the wells, and that'll allow us to track water quality changes over time. And if we identify water quality trends, then we can change our behavior before it becomes too big of a problem. And Amy will be talking more about the monitoring well network and the water quality studies in her presentation. So we also worked with the Illinois State Geological Survey to do a geologic modeling of our subsurface geology. So three-dimensional modeling of our subsurface geology and aquifers. And so with their models, we can look at any point in the county and identify where the aquifers are, what the recharge areas are, the interconnectedness of the aquifers. So on the profile view here, the lighter colors, the yellows, the browns, and golds, those are our groundwater aquifers, our sand and gravel aquifers. The darker colors, the blues, the greens, the dark pinks, those are areas that are less permeable. So the silts and clays, those confining layers or aquatards. And so we can see where the aquifers are, where the recharge areas are, and we can utilize this for planning purposes. We also use the data from the three-dimensional model to recreate our sensitive aquifer recharge areas map. So this map shows where there is a strong connection between the land surface and the various aquifers that we have. So it's identifying those areas that have the highest potential for groundwater recharge and groundwater pollution. So with a single map, you're able to quickly identify whether your property or your project area is in or out of a sensitive aquifer recharge area. And our McHenry County Division of Transportation has long been a leader in sensible salting. And so this is where you're trying to maintain public safety while releasing less and less chlorides into the environment. So when we're using salt or other deicers, we're using chloride mixtures. And the chloride, once it gets into water, cannot be removed. So what happens is it just continues to accumulate in greater levels. And it really is causing a problem nationwide. Starting with the Water Resources Action Plan, the Division of Transportation and Department of Planning and Development have been holding sensitive salting workshops every year. And we've trained over 1,000 people in sensitive salting methods. MCDOT has also become a leader in implementing sensible salting practices. And that often involves using liquids instead of solid salts and de-icers. The liquids are actually much more effective. Once you put it down, it's effective immediately. The solid material actually has to get wet before it starts melting ice. The liquids start working right away. And so we use liquids for anti-icing before storms and de-icing during storms. And a great project that's underway right now is a combined effort with the Division of Transportation and the environmental defenders of McHenry County. And so this is a project where we're installing stream and watershed signs at crossings throughout the county. So the defenders came up with the idea of putting signs at the crossings, approached McDOT with that. They then coordinated to figure out where the sign locations would be and the design of the signs. The defenders then got a grant to pay for the signs. And now McDOT is making the signs and installing them on all the crossings on county roads throughout the county. So you're going to start seeing these signs all over the place. And each of the signs are representing one of the two watersheds in the county. So all of our water bodies flow either to the Kishwaukee River watershed or to the Fox River watershed. So the top of the sign show the stream that is being crossed over. So Coon Creek, Rush Creek, Nippersink Creek, and then the watershed below that. So throughout the county, you're going to have a much better idea of where you are, where the water is going to, and have a sense of place. And when people have a better sense of place, they're more likely to care about it and protect it. So the Water Resources Action Plan, the original one, a lot of great things came out of it. But the data in there and the report itself are well over 10 years old and needed to be updated. So the county board tasked us at the Department of Planning and Development with updating the plan. And so to do this, we created a RAP task force. So the RAP task force was a volunteer group consisting of just a very wide diversity of stakeholders. So we had environmental groups, we had engineering firms, we had public works and planning departments for municipalities. We had all types of businesses represented. Our gravel industry and aggregate folks were there at every meeting. We had realtor groups at every meeting. So people were really coming from all walks of life to participate. We had about 40 to 60 people at most of our meetings, and we would bring in guest speakers every month to talk about topics that they were experts in. We would then have charrettes and discussions about the material that we covered and the draft chapters that were done. And the Water Resource Action Plan is now designed to empower a diverse group of stakeholders to conserve and protect water resources. And so the way the plan works is it identifies the different land uses in the county, the different threats to water resources under each of those land uses, and then best management practices that can be employed to mitigate the risk. So it's really about identifying not just the problems, but providing solutions to protect our water resources. The plan is made up of 18 chapters that are broken up into 4 main sections. So section 1 is an introduction. It has an executive summary that explains why the RAP is important and how it was produced. And then it just provides general overview of our environment, demographics, and land uses. Section 2 gets into our water resources and talks a lot about what we've talked about tonight. So chapter 4 focuses on general water resources. Chapter 5 delves more deeply into water resources specific to McHenry County. Chapter 6 gets into water quality. So we have not only problems from pollution from man-made sources, there are also some naturally occurring pollutants that we need to be aware of and understand how we can prevent pollution and address it when it does occur. And water conservation is one of the critical things for us to get a better handle on. Our water supplies are not infinite, and how we manage our water, how we use it, is going to make all the difference for current and future generations. Section 3 gets into major water issues. So these are issues that apply to water resources across the board. So it starts off in chapter 8 talking about climate change, and we focus just on the basic mechanics of climate change and then the issues that we're going to be facing here in the Illinois area. So we identify potential opportunities to mitigate the risk of climate change where we can avoid the worst of the worst impacts. and then adapt to the changes that we can't avoid at this point. Those changes include flooding. So we're getting greater and greater amounts of precipitation, and that's going to continue into the future. But we're going to get it in fewer and fewer events. So that means that storm intensity is increasing. And so we're getting more and more rainfalls at single events. You know, a 100-year storm is now a storm. And we're getting more and more water when we don't need it, and less water when we do need it. So we're going to have an extremes of drought and flooding that we're going to need to contend with. And one of the major tools that we're going to use to address all of these issues is green infrastructure. And what green infrastructure refers to is utilizing natural systems, so prairies, wetlands, to address our issues. So water that is passing through a vegetated area with native vegetation is being allowed to slow down and infiltrate down in the ground, recharge our groundwater aquifers. It's holding water that would otherwise cause flooding downstream and putting it back in the ground and recharging our aquifers. It's purifying water as it passes through. So green infrastructure really is going to be one of our most powerful tools to address all of the issues in the Water Resources Action Plan. And we're really going to need to get a better handle of how to design these and how to maintain them. So Section 4 gets into land uses and best management practices. So Chapter 12 focuses on residential and commercial development. And as we all know, over the years, we've seen just exponential growth and urban sprawl occurring throughout not only our region, but the country and the planet. And we really want to develop healthy, productive, and profitable communities, but not at the expense of our water resources. As we talked about before, water is necessary for all life. It's also necessary for all economic development. So if we're depleting our water resources or polluting them, we're not only hurting our natural environment, we're hurting our economic environment too. So the two go hand in hand. So we look at smart growth practices that can promote healthy communities while protecting our water resources. So things like infill development, focusing development in areas that are already built out and have capacity and infrastructure, as opposed to building out in green fields where you have to put all new hardscape material in, infrastructure in, and have greater and greater impacts. Industrial development is Chapter 13. Industrial development is a very important part of our economic base. It provides job opportunities, economic development opportunities, but most industries handle toxic materials in one form or another. And if they're handled properly, they can be handled safely. But there are best management practices that need to be implemented. And these aren't things that can be just checked off in a box. It's not just writing on a page or even just talk. These are things that need to be rigorously implemented. It involves training. You can't wait until you have a spill to learn how to do spill containment and cleanup. People need to be trained for industrial developments when the developments are going in. And so there are best management practices for all forms of industrial development that can allow development to occur safely. Our transportation systems. These are systems that are necessary for any modern society. But the vehicles that go on the roads, the location of the roads, the way that they're managed, all can have impacts on our water resources. So how we manage our roadways and right-of-ways really can make a big difference. So Chapter 15 focuses on agriculture. And as you all know, we're largely an agricultural county. Agriculture is one of the most important land uses we have, and will be important for the county's future. Some of the practices we have nowadays cause erosion and cause pollution with excess amounts of fertilizer and pesticides. So we focused on soil health as a way of addressing these issues. Healthy soils are much better able to manage water. A healthy soil can absorb greater amounts of water, promote infiltration, store it for when it's actually needed. And one of the ways to improve soil health is with cover crops. And you're planting vegetation throughout the year so that there's a constant cover. And it allows for greater protection from erosion. It provides greater resiliency from flooding and drought for farmers. So there are economic benefits as well as environmental benefits, but there are challenges to adapting to this new form of agriculture. So we need to be able to find ways to provide the greatest amount of assistance to farmers that are willing to take the lead and make this change. But without a doubt, focusing on soil health and improving the way we manage our soils will have leaps and bounds benefits for future generations. And then open space. Many of us are here because we enjoy the open spaces provided by McHenry County. The McHenry County Conservation District lands, the Land Conservancy properties, and even our own backyards. We've got a lot of open space and great natural habitats in the county. And these are more than just pretty places. All of our open spaces are providing a whole multitude of benefits, whether it's flood prevention, groundwater infiltration, water quality benefits, wildlife habitat. Each of our open spaces are providing just a whole litany of benefits that usually are not recognized or valued, but are still very much part of our life and very much benefit every resident in the county. And so we talk more about how we can manage our open spaces and benefit from them. Recreation is another great thing. We really want to be promoting ecotourism in the county, and recreation such as canoeing and boating and other things can be great, but boating can also be a way of transporting invasive species from one water body to the next. The lead in fishing and hunting gear can cause pollution and harm wildlife. So there are ways that we can adapt our recreational practices to be more sustainable. And then golf courses. We've got a lot of golf courses in the county, and golf courses can use a lot of water and be a great source of pollutants such as pesticides and fertilizers. But there are ways to manage golf courses to be much more sustainable. And so we talk more about how golf courses can be adapted and be sources of benefits as opposed to problems. And this is intended to be a very usable document. It's a big document. We've got over 420 pages, but we provide a lot of graphics. We really worked hard to integrate visuals as well as information. So a lot of these subjects are somewhat complicated, and so we have graphics to really help support that information. We have hired a professional editor to go through the document, and then also hired a professional graphic designer and publisher who's putting the final touches on the plan, and it is now available online. We are going to be printing about 100 copies of the plan. Like I said, it's a big plan, so we can't have an infinite number of copies made, but it is online, and we have it broken out by chapter. So that you can go specifically to the places that you're most interested in. And we really want this to be something that is widely used and benefits the county. So the next step is implementing the RAP. And so we're going to work with municipalities to adapt or adopt the RAP for their own purposes. We want to increase collaboration between municipalities and other organizations. And then we really want to increase data sharing between municipalities and the Illinois State Water Survey and the U.S. Geological Survey. Daniel Abrams with the Illinois State Water Survey is going to be talking about data sharing and the importance of that in his presentation. But the more information that we're able to provide, the better their models will be. And the better their models are, the better resource that we have to plan from, and the less need we have to reinvent the wheel from community to community. So we really can benefit economically as well as from an information basis as we start to share greater and greater amounts of data. We really want to be providing presentations. So each of the topics that we've talked about tonight, each of the chapters, we can be providing specialized presentations to municipalities, organizations, conferences, homeowners associations, schools and classes, or even for churches, libraries. So if you are interested in presentations for your organization, please contact me and we'll figure something out. And we really want people to understand the online resources that we have. So the three-dimensional modeling, there is an online interactive website that is developed by the Illinois State Geological Survey. It's really easy to use, and it just provides tremendous information. And it's actually a lot of fun just to kind of figure out how to work it and to look across the geology of the county. So I highly recommend people get familiar with this and that municipalities start utilizing this for planning purposes. The U.S. Geological Survey's monitoring well website. This is something that everybody should be looking at. It's very easy to use. It provides data that's of interest to us all. Right now we're in a drought, and you can go on and just quickly look and see where the drought is occurring. And then also we can download that data and use that for planning purposes. And then we'll work with communities and other organizations to help find grants to fund the initiatives that we talk about in the RAP. So just closing thoughts, water is necessary for all life. Water is necessary for all economic development. What we have here in McHenry County really is pretty special, and it deserves to be protected. And I really appreciate your time. If you do have questions after the Q&A period, please don't hesitate to reach out to me by email. I work for you guys. I care very deeply about water resources, and I am happy to share my knowledge and experience with you guys.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the presentation and got some good information out of that. We're going to go ahead and do a short question and answer period. We've got the Environmental Defenders staff going through the questions, and we'll be reading those aloud to us. If we don't get to your questions during the Q&A period and you would like to follow up, we're going to be staying on for about a half hour after the presentation. We'll stay here to 8. So after we close the formal part of the presentation, you're welcome to stay on and ask further questions. So with that, Cynthia, do you have a question to ask?
Yes, Scott, thanks so much. There are some questions that I think I can partner together, and because they have to do with municipalities and educating their residents about water conservation is part of it. There's also a question about whether or not our municipalities track annual road salt usage over time, and also about development. So with hundreds of homes and new places being developed in our county, can our county sustain that if we're already seeing a depletion in water? So again, some questions surrounding our municipalities. If you can tackle that, that would be great. We have a few minutes for your Q&A, and then we'll have to move on. Okay, that's actually quite a bit there. As far as the salt usage, there is not currently real accurate salt usage statistics being collected. McHenry County Division of Transportation is monitoring that pretty closely, but we really want to start working with municipalities for them to start tracking salt usage and salt reduction. So the Division of Transportation is now they have 3 routes that are specifically using liquids as opposed to solids. And so they're tracking the salt reduction, and the reductions are significant. And then also the cost savings, because you can actually, they make their own brine. And so they're really able to control the cost. And by putting less chlorides down there, we're actually saving money as well. So they are doing that. And we really want to start collecting data from all the municipalities so that we can really track the benefits. But that's not being done at the moment. As far as municipalities being able to add new development, they're the ones that make the decisions for themselves. That's not something that the county has any real say over. But that's what this plan is about. We really want to have development that respects our water resources and our natural resources in general. And there are ways to do that. Infill development, brownfield development. Population density can actually be a positive thing if it's done properly. It makes much more efficient public transportation that you couldn't have without the population density. So by looking at smart growth practices, we're able to really focus on water benefits as well as economic development. And then I can't remember what the other element was. What am I missing, Cynthia? You pretty much hit those few elements as far as the municipalities. There was a question that I wanted to go to about someone who's concerned about watering their lawn and that its effect on their own well.
Yeah, and so it's kind of interesting. The Northwest Herald actually did a pretty good article the other day that touched on this. So our aquifers are different. So Huntley is reliant 100% on deep aquifers. Crystal Lake relies on a combination of deep and shallow sand and gravel aquifers. McHenry depends solely on sand and gravel. So the issues are a little bit different in each one. So if you're pulling water out of the, using municipal water that's pulling out of a deep aquifer to water, then you are depleting that aquifer just to keep your grass green. We need to be careful about that. In McHenry, and I think I saw a question in there about thinking McHenry was running out of water. I'm not aware of that. As far as I know, McHenry is actually probably the least impacted by water drawdown with their aquifers. So they're shallow sand and gravel, but because of their topography, right next to the Fox River, all the water above is reaching down to them. So I don't know anything about them running out of water, to be honest. Each of these communities has different challenges as far as watering, and we're entering a drought, so we really need to start paying more and more attention to what we're doing, how we're using water on our own properties. So let the grass go dormant. It'll come back green once we get rain again, but to be artificially irrigating the lawn just to keep it green during a major drought is pretty irresponsible. So there's no one solution, but these are things that the better understanding we have of where our water comes from, the better able we are to make decisions on how to manage it.
Scott, one last quick one before we move on, and then we will get to those other questions that we didn't get to touch on at the end of the event here. But on average, how many feet below normal is the groundwater level during this current drought?
And once again, that's not a one-size-fits-all answer. So it's really pretty interesting. And once again, I mentioned the U.S. Geological Survey's Groundwater Watch website. Talk more about that, but it's something everybody can look at and see for themselves. You can see the water level rise and then drop down for 2012 drought, and then come back up to where we were all experiencing the flooding, and then dropping down now. So you really can have a solid understanding of the correlation between climate and our groundwater. But some of the wells I've seen drops of 20 feet, other wells drops of 4 feet. But one thing to kind of consider just visually is just think about if Wonder Lake got 8 feet of water overnight, how that would affect the surrounding landscape, or if it dropped down 8 feet overnight. We're talking large volume of water with these drawdowns. The Groundwater Watch maps are available to everybody. We've got links to them on our website, along with some instructions. So just go to McHenryH2O.com, and you'll be able to scroll down to the bottom, and I've got a list of the websites that we're talking about tonight, along with some basic instructions. And then you're always welcome to contact me by email, and that's on our website once again, which is McHenryH2O.com.
Thanks, Scott. And I think it's time for your next presenter.
All right. Well, one of the greatest things about my job, and I really do love my job, is I get to work with a caliber of people that is just amazing. So I get to work with scientists with the U.S. Geological Survey, Illinois State Water Survey, Illinois State Geological Survey, and it's very humbling. I'm constantly learning all the things I didn't know, and it's challenging to work with people so smart. But we've got two of those very smart people with us tonight. The first one is Amy Gahala, and she is a hydrologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, and she is also the lead scientist who manages our monitoring well network and our groundwater water quality analysis. And so she'll be talking about that tonight. And so we'll go ahead and watch her presentation. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Amy Gahala. I'm a hydrologist with the U.S. Geological Survey. And today I'm going to be talking about groundwater vulnerabilities such as water quantity and water quality, and how McHenry County monitors that using the McHenry County Groundwater Monitoring Network. To do that, I'm going to need to give you a little bit of a hydrogeology refresher. Scott Kuykendall did a great intro to that. I'm going to go a little bit into a deeper dive, but not too complicated. Then I'm going to talk about how contaminants can get into the groundwater, the surface water, and potentially the drinking water. And then I'll discuss the McHenry County Groundwater Monitoring Network and what was presented and published in the 2017 report that talks about the water levels that were collected, what we learned from them, and also the water quality results from 2010. An aquifer is defined as groundwater that fills the void spaces of sediments and crevices, and where those void spaces are interconnected and that water is allowed to flow, that is an aquifer. In this case, this is an unconfined aquifer. This aquifer receives water readily through precipitation that infiltrates down into the saturated zone. And that replenishes that groundwater, and this can be considered a more renewable resource because that replenished groundwater happens on the order of days to years. There is nothing that's impermeable, limiting the amount of water that can infiltrate down into that recharge area. A confined aquifer, however, is slightly different. You have an impermeable layer called a confining bed that will limit the amount of water that gets to the lower portions of the aquifer, or those more flowing aquifers. So those clays and silts are sometimes referred to as tills. They don't flow water readily. They have a lot of void spaces and they can contain a lot of water, but they don't readily transmit the water. And so that will take centuries to millennia for the water to get down into those areas. And so when you overdraft those water resources, you're not getting it back in this lifetime. The other thing to note, though, on the plus side, is that these confining beds or these impermeable layers do help limit the amount of contaminants that could enter the subsurface. And so you can get cleaner water and limited impacts from land use wherever there's confining layers. So the purpose of all of this effort is to get a better handle on where those locations are and how much water needs to be protected and conserved in their proper locations. And this is why part of the hydrologic cycle is, groundwater comes down through precipitation, becomes part of runoff, and recharges into the groundwater or discharges into surface waters. Well, it takes along with that all of the land use contaminants, or even it could take it up into the atmosphere, contaminants such as pharmaceuticals and waste compounds, road salts, contaminants of emerging concern like perfluoroalkanes and microplastics. All of those things can be part of that same hydrologic cycle, and that's where McHenry County is at the forefront of really being able to understand their hydrogeology and understand how to protect both their quantity and their quality. So as I mentioned, McHenry County is at the forefront of being able to observe and monitor for water quality issues and water quantity issues. And they did this back in 2008. They installed a network of groundwater monitoring wells. That network of monitoring wells totals about 42 monitoring wells. 11 of them are co-located, or what we call nested wells. They are observing various depths within the sand and gravel aquifer. And 37 of those monitoring wells are also equipped with pressure transducers that collect water levels every 15 minutes, and then that gets displayed to real time where you can see it at any time on the World Wide Web. And this was all made possible through interagency cooperation with the Illinois State Geological Survey providing and drilling many of these wells previously, and then the Illinois State Water Survey allowing us to collect these water levels from their wells. And then McHenry County had a couple of additional wells filling in the data gaps where we would like them. You can view it on the website link that's listed here, but it looks something like this. I can click on any one of these red icons and out will pop up a little information bubble about what well that is. And then there's an access data hyperlink that you click on, and it'll take you to that separate page for that specific well. And you can look up all the information on that particular well for that page. And you can look up the water levels for any period that you want. In this case, it'll be 10 years of data. And you can view it from last week all the way to the whole period of record to last month, whatever season you're interested in. The other thing that this web interface will have is the water quality information for that same monitoring well. So us as scientists, we're very excited about this network because it's very unique. There's not a lot of network of continuous water level data for this type of aquifer. And so we were kind of like kids in a candy store trying to explore this type of data. And what we wanted to be able to do was tell from the water level data what degree of confinement or interconnections were apparent from the water levels. Because you can look at the geology of something, but it doesn't always tell you how connected it is or how confined it is. The subsurface can be a mixture of unconfined, confined, and then another complication, semi-confined, so a little bit of both. We also looked at, from this data, areas of recharge and discharge, pumping influences, and then we quantified the recharge that was actually added over the 5 years of data that were collected. And then we looked at the trends and the responses to climatic conditions. And this is all, again, part of that 2017 report. And one of the things that it identified with that trend is just that the exacerbation of water demand that occurs during a drought. Whenever you have a drought scenario, the water demand does increase, as Scott mentioned, by 50%. And that's because everybody's watering their gardens and their grasses and replenishing their pool supply. So we got to see that in those water level trends. Long-term trends tend to want to be more on a decadal scale or longer to give you more of that dynamic influence of climate and overall conditions of trend. So I'm going to get into that in a little more detail in a moment. So here is a figure that just shows you that complex nature of the subsurface, where you have a mixture of unconfined, semi-confined, and confined aquifers. And this is distributed very randomly throughout the sand and gravel aquifer. And as I mentioned, from the water levels, we were able to determine those locations that certainly were confined. That's depicted by the red confined circles. The yellow and black circles are semi-confined, meaning there's a mixture of interconnection going there. And the green circles are, generally open, they're readily recharged. And so those kind of give you a distribution of your interconnectedness and recharge areas. We looked at pumping influences. So those monitoring wells collecting water levels every 15 minutes ended up picking up pumping influence signatures. So whenever that pumping well, like the nearby municipal supply well, was pumping, it depicted a signature that we know as a hydrologist as a drawdown curve. And then when that pump was turned off, according to its schedule, that curve was allowed to recover. So we have this drawdown and recovery curve that is evident in many of these wells, and we looked at the distribution of those relative to the municipal supply wells. Some of these wells also have pumping influences, but they're not related to a municipal supply well. They're more related to irrigation, because we didn't see curves all the time. We only saw the curves maybe during spring season or whenever they wanted to turn the irrigation wells on. And this is important because it can be used to tell you the extent of your municipal supply influence, so you can get an idea of your water protection areas, your water supply protection areas, so you can kind of refine what those areas should look like and overlay that on top of your recharge areas, and it just provides a greater depth of information. The Groundwater Watch page can be found at this link, and this will take you right to the McHenry County area and show you all the wells that are, at least for that snapshot in time, either reds, which is much below normal, oranges, which is below normal, or greens, normal. And then the blues are above normal and greater than above normal. And it's all based off of a statistical analysis of frequency of probabilities. I can click on any one of those data points and it'll take me to yet another separate page for that well. And that separate page for that well is going to show a couple of different figures. This figure is a year's worth of data looking at 2020 to 2021, the spring to spring season, basically. And in this case, the daily data is plotted against the typical range of water levels that have been experienced at this well or observed at this well and the frequency at which it's been observed. And so you can see that in the beginning of 2020, the water levels greatly spiked above normal. And because we did have a pretty wet season in the beginning of 2020, well, as 2020 progressed, it started to get really dry. And so these are those moments of extremes that Scott mentioned, where we're going to experience kind of two ends of the spectrum in one season. And while 2020 might not have been considered a real drought or however we want to define it, it still was a period of lower precipitation. And so what that ended up doing is causing a lot of these wells to drop below their normal range. And then in the winter time, we didn't really see the snow until February. That's when we had an onslaught of all the snow, and it didn't go away until spring melt. The other two figures or graphs that you will see on that webpage is a comparison of the discrete water level measurements and also a comparison of the continuous water level measurement. But in this figure, you can see the difference in data resolution when you compare the discrete data to the long-term daily data, and it shows you just the amount of peaks and the amount of troughs and the seasonality between all the years. This is 10 years of data, and it does show you that, in general at this location, we're, kind of fairly stable at this location. And again, as we look a little bit deeper into more long-term data, those peaks and those lows can be analyzed for whether or not they're getting more and more extreme in either end. So here is the network, the groundwater monitoring network, and this is also used to monitor for water quality, obviously, on a decadal scale. So every 10 years, we'll go and monitor for certain water quality parameters. And in 2010, 42 of these wells were sampled. 4 USGS wells were also added and included into this because they're urban wells and they're shallow, and they give you an understanding of what the urban input might be in those locations. So in 2010, we sampled for nutrients such as nitrates and ammonia, major ions, and metals. And then we took a subset of those wells and we sampled for trace elements, dissolved gases, pesticides, and volatile organic compounds. And as a reminder, all this is in that 2017 report, but also can be accessed on our database. In 2020, I did get out there and we did sample all the same wells in McHenry County for nutrients, major ions, and metals. We did it again. But we also selected a different set of monitoring wells for a subset of samples looking at pharmaceuticals and waste indicator compounds. And that focus was on monitoring wells that in the previous 2017 data analysis of chloride sources indicated that those wells might have some influence under like sewage. So we really wanted to make sure that there was nothing deleterious in those wells based on that chloride source analysis, or confirm whether that chloride source analysis was really sewage or not. The other thing that was added in 2020 is that McHenry County wanted to look at, well, what's going out of our system through the surface water. So we selected 3 locations for surface water sites, major rivers basically, that we sampled for pharmaceuticals and waste indicator compounds in those locations as well. And the publication of that report will be out in 2022, and I'll be back here next year probably talking about that, I hope. All right, so what was found in the 2010 water quality results? And here is the anthropogenic results. In this case, pesticides and volatile organic compounds were detected. All the detections were below the Environmental Protection Agency's health and aesthetically based benchmarks. This is part of that subset of samples. So in pesticides, there were 62% of samples that had some detection of pesticides. For volatile organic compounds, 44% of the wells tested had a detection of volatile organic compounds. On the flip side, we did have some exceedances of the US EPA health and aesthetically based benchmarks, particularly for nitrates that exceeded in one well at 10 milligrams per liter. And then for chlorides, 2 wells exceeded the secondary MCL or secondary maximum contaminant level standard of 250 milligrams per liter at 2 wells. Now I'm going to go down a little bit of a chloride rabbit hole because, again, we were wanting to figure out how much chloride was being an issue in McHenry County. We wanted to identify if it was an issue to be concerned with. So in the 2010 data, the chloride concentrations ranged from 0.49 to 521 milligrams per liter in the sampling event. But we also went back to some of those NACWA wells and resampled those. So that's why you're going to see additional ranges up in that graph there. This graph is showing the chloride concentrations on the x-axis relative to the well depth. And what you'll notice too is that the concentrations of chlorides are much greater in the shallowest portions of the aquifer versus the deeper portions of the aquifer. It starts to decrease. And so the shallow aquifer, or the shallow wells that had the highest concentrations, were those urban NACWA wells or those wells located near heavily trafficked roads or highways. The other 2010 results for naturally occurring analytes, these are things that exist naturally because this groundwater, even though it's in the shallow portion of, with respect to every other aquifer, it just has plenty of time to dissolve various minerals from the rocks and the minerals that are in sediment that are around it. And in this case, arsenic exceeded the MCL of 10 micrograms per liter in 26% of the samples. And this map kind of just shows you what wells those were and the distribution, which tends to be, if you'll notice, kind of on the western half of McHenry County. And they're also mainly in the deeper portions of the sand and gravel aquifer. The concentrations of arsenic, however, can be reduced, though. The good news is it can be reduced with ion exchange systems or carbon filters or reverse osmosis systems. The other naturally occurring analytes that are the bane of our existence are like iron and manganese. These are the things that stain all your fixtures and you have to scrub everything really clean and you can't wear white ever again. So this again comes from those rocks and sediments and gets dissolved. Iron exceeded the secondary maximum contaminant level of 300 micrograms per liter in 85% of the samples. So yes, it is very prevalent in this aquifer. The manganese exceeded the 50 micrograms per liter in 30% of the monitoring wells. One of them actually also exceeded the drinking water advisory, which is a non-regulatory health-based standard. But it's kind of more of a suggestion like, hey, maybe that much manganese isn't a good idea for your health. So that did have one exceedance there. But the good news too is that, like arsenic, these compounds can also be reduced with, ion exchange systems and carbon filters and reverse osmosis systems. So what about the 2020 water quality results? Well, I can't get into that yet, but the report and the results are currently in draft form. You can, if you are extremely curious and want to know, you can look up any one of those results on that NWIS mapper website that I mentioned earlier, and that I would happy to walk you through it too if you're interested. But you can look up that data. You can look up, in addition to the water level data, you can look up the 2010 data and the 2020 data that will all be on the same page or in the water quality portion of that database. And so the report will be released in 2022, and hopefully I'll be here next year explaining the results of that. And with that, here's my contact info, and feel free to email me.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Amy. I think it ended a little abruptly, but are you there, Amy? And are you ready for some questions?
She did. I pressed the plus just now.
Here she is. Hi, Amy.
Oh, sorry, a little delay there.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready for some questions.
Okay. Cynthia?
Okie doke. Hey, Amy, thanks. So we had a couple of questions that were connected, and that has to do with fertilizers and pesticides. Are they a contributor to chloride pollution? And is that an issue in the wells? Are chlorides from pesticides and fertilizers, for example?
So chlorides are not really from the pesticides or herbicides, but they are potentially from fertilizers. In the 2017 report, I also went down another rabbit hole, as I mentioned, and we did an analysis of chloride bromide. It's called the chloride bromide ratio analysis, and it tells us the source of the chlorides potentially. And one of the curves that I matched to was potassium chloride, which is linked to fertilizer use. And there were a couple wells that indicated that it could potentially be under the influence of fertilizer or potassium chloride sources. So that is the extent of which I know. But I can tell you that in 2020 we did sample many of these same wells that were suspected of fertilizer or sewage. We sampled them for pharmaceuticals, waste indicator compounds, and pesticides, herbicides, I think are in some of those as well. So.
And I'll elaborate on that as well. So there's a lot of studies out there regarding chloride sources. And I think next to well, without a doubt, the major contributor is road salt and other deicers that just dwarfs any other inputs. But water softeners and septic systems certainly are another source. And I think your study was able to identify ions to clarify the potential sources. Is that correct, Amy?
Yeah. To some degree, yeah. It was able to clarify which wells we suspected might be from, that's where the sewage would be coming from, would be septic or any leaking sewers. And it just looks at like the ratio of chloride to bromide. Sorry, there's a bug. And it looks at that and it plots it along, yeah, it's a big complicated mess, but if you're really interested in it, just let me know and I could dissect that for you a little bit more.
I think one question I had seen earlier also was asking about chlorides and what the issue is. And once chlorides are highly soluble, and so once it comes in contact with water, there really is no practical way to remove it. Really, the only way to remove it is from reverse osmosis, and there's no way we can remove that from the entire aquifer. Or even our water bodies. It's your home system can remove it. That's really the most practical way that you can have any type of system remove it. So once it gets into our water resources, the concentration increases. And so Amy's graph was showing on one of the axes how the concentration levels are getting higher. 250 milligrams per liter is a secondary drinking water standard. That's when water starts to taste salty. And so that's kind of the threshold that's used. But as that goes up, that can have more and more impact on your water resources. And I think Daniel may talk about it. I can't remember if that was in his presentation or not, but their communication with communities in Will County are that their chloride levels are getting so high, they're ready to abandon their sand and gravel aquifers and go to deep aquifers. Even though the deep aquifers aren't going to have enough water to supply their needs. And so, we don't want to sacrifice our sand and gravel aquifers due to road salt use. So sensitive salting is something that's in our future. We're going to have to do a better job nationally on our use of road salt and deicers. I'm sorry, did you have something, Amy?
Yeah, there was a recent study that came out that looked at chloride concentrations and their buildup over time in aquifers and how they often can have another effect where they actually increased the radium in the aquifer. So some things that naturally occur in the aquifer can be increased because chloride is now influencing the way that molecule moves in the water. So that's the other interesting study that was recently published, is that it can increase the concentrations of other things we don't want to see in the aquifer.
I think we're going to have to cut that off, the questions to keep moving. But if anybody does have questions that they want to ask, please stick around after the formal part of the presentation. We'd really love to have further conversations and answer questions. There's a lot we can get into, but I think we need to move on to Dan Abrams' presentation. Is Daniel queued up? Okay. So Daniel Abrams, when I was talking about just the privilege of being able to work with people, Daniel is also one of those people that I highly respect, and has really just been a tremendous help in understanding the water resources of McHenry County. And he's very generous with his time. I really appreciate his the time he spends with me answering my questions. But we're very grateful to have him here. Daniel Abrams is the hydrogeologist with the Illinois State Water Survey, who does groundwater modeling. So he's kind of the premier groundwater modeler for the state, and has been working very hard to understand the groundwater issues in the deep bedrock aquifer in Will County and Joliet. So we're very privileged to have him here tonight. And so we'll go ahead and watch Daniel's presentation. Thank you.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Abrams. I'm with the State Water Survey, the groundwater flow modeler. And what I want to talk about today is the sandstone aquifer in McHenry County. There's a few things I want to get into. First, I want to talk about a little bit about background of where I work at the Illinois State Water Survey. I then want to dive into the sandstone and focus on two things specifically. One is the sustainability of this aquifer, and the other is whether or not it is at risk. After that, I want to talk about the implications of this for water supply planning. And finally, I want to talk about some recommendations for next steps. So the water survey is down in Champaign, Illinois, very small building that we work out of out there. And we look at water issues throughout the state of Illinois. One of the major ways that we do that is we go around and meet with communities. This image here shows where we're meeting with communities and industries down in Will County about many of the same issues I'm going to talk about today, the sandstone. That's one important way we collect information. Another important way we collect information is we collect water quality samples and we collect water levels throughout the state. We don't just look at groundwater. There's a group down at the Water Survey down in Champaign who also looks at atmospheric science, looks at river levels, and all of this information is important. Such as right now, when giving this presentation, McHenry County is in a severe drought. All of this information we take back in teams and develop groundwater flow models to help understand issues throughout the state and cycle that information back. And it's a continuous loop, meeting with communities, collecting data, and developing models. We don't do this alone. We work with a lot of different entities. We work closely with IDNR, Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Office of Water Resources, who assess statewide issues, particularly focused on sustainability. We also work with regional groups. An important one for McHenry County is the Northwest Water Planning Alliance. And then we work closely with local stakeholders, including county level and municipal level stakeholders to address these issues. The issue we're talking about today is the sandstone. The Water Survey has been looking at this for over 100 years. It's a cyclical process that we keep going through that I'll explain. But at this point, I think it's time to call it that the sandstone aquifer is dying. And I'll explain what I mean as we go through this presentation. The important thing to understand about the sandstone in McHenry County, in the northwest portion of this cross section, what you have is actually the southeastern corner of McHenry County. That is where the sandstone is most heavily utilized. And so imagine you're standing there. What's beneath your feet? Well, the first thing you see is unconsolidated material. That can be a mixture of clays or sands. You go deeper and you get into bedrock. The first couple of layers, you see they're colored gray. Well, they're going to impede flow. In Amy's previous presentation, she talked about confining layers. These are confining layers that act as lids over the top of the sandstone aquifer. The sandstone aquifers are in blue. The two that are readily utilized in McHenry County are the St. Peter and the Ironton-Garrelsville. The Mount Simon has a higher salinity, so it isn't used as very much in this county. So that is the issue that we have. These aquifers are deep and they're covered by confining layers that impede the movement of water. Very little gets in, particularly when compared to what's being removed from the sandstone. This plot here, if you look at the top of the pink line, the pink area, that represents how much water is being withdrawn, the sum total. Within that, there's two portions. There's the blue portion. That's coming from pretty fresh recharge. That's making it through the confining layers. They're semi-confining. They allow a little bit of water to leak through. Actually, they allow 40% of the water that Northeast Illinois uses to leak through. That may actually surprise you how large that number actually is. But 60% of the withdrawals, what you see in pink right now, are unsustainable. They're not making it through to the sandstone. When you go to McHenry County, we just saw a cross-section that showed all of those aquitards, another term for confining layers. But when you sum up the total of what's coming in to the sandstone in McHenry County, and you compare it to the demands, so the demands here are in blue, and the supply is in orange, supply is much greater. We have more water coming in McHenry County to the sandstone. This is a sandstone-specific plot than we have being removed. That might surprise you. We'll talk about why that is. But don't necessarily think this means everything is okay. Because as you focus in different areas, you find different stories. In that southeastern portion of McHenry County, where a lot of the demands are, wells are often completed only into the deeper Ironton-Garrelsville. That deeper aquifer that you saw in that earlier cross-section, it means water has to infiltrate that much farther to get to them. And when we start looking at available supply that can get there, it's a very small number. So yes, on total, water's coming into the county, but it's not always coming in where we need it. And so this plot shows you what this looks like in plan view. Everywhere you see blue is where the confining layers are either absent or they're allowing enough movement in to get a considerable amount of water. That's why we have water coming in McHenry County. But look at where the demands are. They don't match with where the water is entering with those blue areas. And that leads to some complications. What are those complications? Let's simply, in those areas, withdrawals exceed the supply, what's coming in, and water levels drop, and they continue to drop, and they continue to drop. Now, these deep aquifers are under pressure when they were first drilled. like a can of soda that you shake up and open up and water or soda comes flying out. But it only comes out for so long before all that pressure is bled off. We're dealing with something similar here. All those withdrawals are reducing that pressure until eventually water levels fall into the sandstone. And this is where problems start. It's not that the wells go dry. It's that they start to dewater the formation, and that leads to a number of issues. The most prominent is that water was holding that sandstone together. As the water levels fall, the sandstone's pretty friable, it caves, and that sand gets pumped up, moved through the pump. Sand through machinery is not a good thing, and that creates problems. And that's why a lot of wells are no longer even open to the uppermost St. Peter, even in McHenry County, because this has either been an issue or it's an issue that people are trying to avoid, and rightfully so. That's expensive to handle. So that's the issue we deal with, that when a sandstone dewaters, when it desaturates, those two terms are synonymous, that's when the issues manifest, not when the aquifer goes dry. So this has been something that we've been building our knowledge on for 30 years before I was born, going back into the 1950s, where the Water Survey noted water levels are falling and they're falling fast. We communicate that information to communities. We get the question back, okay, well, how long can I stay on the aquifer? It's a very logical question. There's some discussion back and forth, but eventually a community realizes this needs to change, this needs to stop, we need to get off, and generally the choice is to go to Lake Michigan. An assumption's often made at this point. Has the issue now been resolved? Kind of seems like it. Water levels went up, and there's a temporary pause. We go back 20, 30 years and the cycle starts again. This happened in the 50s, went through in the 80s. We're going through it now in the southeastern suburbs of Chicago. And you see it in this plot. The darker blues in here represent later and later years that communities switched away from the sandstone at some point in time. And it's been a slow transition creeping out, but there are still communities now who are looking at making this switch. This isn't an issue that's been resolved. The newest one right now is in the southeastern suburbs. As many of you are probably aware, if you've been looking at the news, is that Joliet, in those southeastern suburbs, a major water user. They use more water than McHenry County total. They're leaving the aquifer in the year 2030 is the current plan to go to Lake Michigan. So this question needs evaluated, but we want to get ahead of 20 to 30 years. We want to try to understand if this issue is happening in the very near future. So here's a result from our model. The first plot shows what risk looks like right now with Joliet on the aquifer, everybody else pumping what they pump now. Everywhere in orange represents where water levels are 400 to 600 feet above the top of the Ironton-Gellsville. That may sound like a lot. Who cares? You turn on some of these wells, though, they can have 2, 3, and even 400 feet of drawdown. So these are when the wells aren't pumping that we're looking at. When those wells are pumping, you get 200, 300, 400 feet of drawdown. You're getting really close to the top of the Ironton-Gellsville, whereas we discussed earlier, that's when issues would start to manifest. That's what we look like now. Now, if we jump forward in time to 2050, what's pumpage going to be? We have to run scenarios. We don't know what that's going to be. You don't want to just run a single number. So we run a low growth and a higher growth, a current trend scenario. And you can see the results are, the risk is still there. And if you look in McHenry County, which I think is what a lot of you are going to be interested in, you're going to see that, well, it depends. If we go with the lower growth scenario actually demands didn't change that much. They actually went down a little bit due to water conservation, due to some communities nearby switching off in Lake County in this scenario. And you even get a little bit of recovery in places and a little bit more drawdown in others, but the general pattern between 2020 and low growth looks similar. But if you look at the current trend, that's just 2 MGD more, 2 million gallons a day more. That really starts to look different. We're now getting those pockets of red. What does the red mean? Well, it means we're within 400 feet. Remember I mentioned wells can have 400 feet of drawdown in the sandstone. They don't always, but they can. And that's where the concern starts to come in, and we start to see some pockets popping up in the year 2050. Just want to go back to this to remind geology matters. It's no coincidence that where we see the risk manifesting not only is where the demands are, but it's where the water is not coming into the aquifer. That's more so in the western part of the county, and our drawdown is in that southeastern corner. It's an unfortunate reality. Don't be distracted by the cat licking. It's trying to get water deeper and deeper and deeper, right? That's the analogy here. But it's an unfortunate reality that Joliet switching off of the sandstone aquifer is not going to resolve these issues for anybody. That's the same thing that we found out for communities in Will County. So of course that's going to hold true as we move north. At what point will water levels have fallen too far? We need to begin to understand future withdrawal. I mentioned this earlier. Here's just 3 scenarios from an old study just to give you a feel of the range of total demands that have been simulated in the past in McHenry County. Which of these is most realistic? That's not something I'm able to answer, but this is a range of scenarios that we've seen that have been played out in past water demand future scenarios. Okay, that's often just assuming municipal growth, but what about industry? All the risk plots I showed you earlier, those orange and red plots, we're just looking at community growth and assuming no industry growth. So what if a new industry comes in? What if it's a data center? I realize that's been in the news recently. What if a data center comes in? Data centers use quite a bit of water. Where will that come in? How much will it use? That's going to matter. Another important one, and Amy's presentation discussed many of the issues related with these shallow, unconfined aquifers and vulnerability to contamination. If that persists and reaches a point that communities need to consider alternative sources, we've seen throughout Northeast Illinois, that alternative source is often the deep aquifer. This deep, unsustainable, at-risk aquifer we've been talking about is often viewed as a preferable alternative when water quality becomes a concern. In McHenry County, where more than 2/3 of the demands are using the shallow aquifer, about 1/3 using the sandstone. When we develop our models, we take whatever distribution and we just scale it as it is now between the shallow and the deep. But if things change, if the proportion changes, and suddenly we go to a 50-50 split between shallow and deep because there's choices made to add more deep wells rather than shallow, that changes all of this story. That changes how we perceive risk in this system. And it's a balancing act that all communities now have to face, balancing the unsustainability of the deep aquifer and the threats to shallow water quality, or in some cases, isolated, but there are issues with quantity, supply as well that at least need to be weighed when considering, will the next well that we drill be shallow or deep? And there's other details. I don't want to get too much into this. Just briefly to say, this plot shows that as water levels fall through time, often wells become less productive. It means they have more drawdown when they're turned on, and that drives them closer and closer to at-risk levels. This decrease in productivity often can accelerate how quickly a community approaches the end of the life. Remember, we're talking about a dying sandstone aquifer. It helps assess how close communities, how soon communities reach the end of their life. This is the kind of detail that you might not think about. It's not pumping, but it matters when making these assessments. So we're obviously on a clock. Is that 30 years? Is it 100 years? There's a lot of uncertainty in that. And I generally don't recommend using a single value estimate to define that uncertainty. I think it's important to take the time to understand what different water supply planning initiatives could lead to. That's where collaboration comes in. We've been working closely with communities in the southwestern suburbs to head on this issue that's there. This is going to manifest in the next 10 years for many of them, and we're working closely with them to help address that. And also data. We need the data. All the data that you've seen in earlier presentations in this presentation is essential to telling this story and understanding the fate of the aquifer. So in summary, there are pockets in McHenry County where certainly demand exceeds supply. That's led to risk, particularly when we run the models out into the future. But that's, of course, uncertain on when and where that would manifest. The clock is ticking, and the variables need explored here to define when, and that's where collaboration is key. So I want to close with some recommendations here. The first, for any water operators out there, annually send your static and pumping water levels to the Illinois Water Inventory Program at the Illinois State Water Survey. This is critical information that we need to understand this. Continue and expand monitoring as much as possible. That's a recommendation. All of the data that you saw earlier in earlier presentations, all of that is help feeding into this story, because the sandstone and the shallow aquifer are not two separate things. They have to be considered in tandem when doing water supply planning. And that planning needs to have collaboration at all levels, including scientists, including elected officials, water, public works directors, the state IDNR. Having all of these folks involved is critical to being able to make the right decisions. Unfortunately, that costs money. We continue to search for avenues to fund this work in northeastern Illinois and in McHenry County. We have a couple of proposals that are out there, and we continue and invite you all to share any ideas for developing collaboration or for funding initiatives or what have you. We certainly invite you to contact us to explore those. And there's my contact information. Please let me know if you have any questions, any concerns. Happy to talk about all this. I'm just going to close by saying it's not, despite the tone, despite everything I presented, it's not time to hit the red panic button yet. But it's time to look at the data. It's time to take a close look at what your neighbors are going to do and thinking about what those implications are. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan, for a great presentation. It's just really important information for everybody to be aware of. We are a bit over time, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the official part of the presentation. But we do want people to stick around and for additional question and answer. We've got a lot of questions, and I'd like to go through them. So anybody that wants, stick around, please do. But I just want to thank everybody for participating tonight, and for the tremendous help that we got from the environmental defenders, especially Cynthia Canner. Could not have done this without her. A lot of technical challenges trying to put this thing online, and really look forward to having a live event next year with great food and catering. My tagline is always, we want people to go home smarter and fuller. So we will be contacting the first 100 people that registered and attended about the $15 gift certificate. So we still do have local food tied to this event. But thank you all so much for joining us, and have a pleasant evening. And we'll go ahead and move into a extended Q&A period, and we'll continue this till 8 o'clock. So Cynthia, do you want to go ahead and start the questions?
Yeah, that'd be great. We have a couple of great questions that are related, and they have to do with reusing water. So what are the opportunities for water reuse to help us to better fit our water needs with our water resources? And related also, can treated wastewater be used to rewater the deep aquifer in the Joliet area? And after that, we'll go to a couple of Lake Michigan questions.
Daniel, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the second question first, in terms of, and they're kind of related. The expense with water reuse is of course, there's the stigma of reusing water that is something that has to be overcome. That's an issue that's down in those southeastern suburbs, the Des Plaines River that runs through. The technology might be there. That's pretty poor water quality to get that up to drinking water standard. Now, in terms of reusing the water that's removed from the aquifer, treating it and putting it back in, we've investigated that, and that's challenging. And the reason why is we're combating 150 years of withdrawals with trying to replace it with often just 2 or 3 wells pumping, injecting 1 to 3 mgd. That bumps up the water level a little bit, but 2 things: that pressure has to be applied throughout, because as I mentioned in the presentation, this aquifer is under pressure. You have to build that up, and that's what you're doing when you're injecting water. You're building pressure back up. That may not be that much, unfortunately, compared to the drawdown. So combating 150 years of withdrawals with either seasonal injection to get that water reuse, or even if it's continuous, it would have to be a lot of water, a lot of cost. Technically, is it possible? Perhaps, but one challenge that we don't know what would happen, what are the water quality implications? You're introducing water that has a lot of oxygen. Do you clog up pore spaces and actually do more damage in that way? We don't know. There hasn't been a pilot study done. There's been some work done over in Iowa. How relevant that is, I'm not sure. So we've looked into it. It's not something I would just say rule out. It's never an option, but it's something that for fast tracking, like Joliet needs to do, didn't turn out to be an option for them. And it's something that would need careful consideration, discussion with IEPA about some implications there. Same with, water reuse. Certainly, if the technology is there and people are willing to accept it, that's an option. And are we there now? It doesn't seem like we are, just in terms of what's been going on. Will we be there in 20, 30 years? I don't know, but that's certainly something interesting that should be considered with water supply plans.
Well, and I'd like to weigh in a little bit more on that too. It is an important topic, and I think Cindy's talking a little bit about this as well in her comments. But there are different types of water reuse. So I think water reuse, particularly for industrial applications, would be something that has to be done. And I think you've talked about that, Dan, that Joliet has water reuse as a primary water conservation tool in addition to the pipeline. So water reuse can be used to supply a variety of different sources. And so even if that's not necessarily being used for drinking water, that's offsetting the amount of water that would otherwise need to be pumped for that industrial process. So the benefits really can be compounded. As far as pumping wastewater back into the ground, to be honest, it scares the hell out of me. And part of the reason is that, if we were just using organic materials that we could actually remove easily from the process, that'd be great. But we are, using so many different types of chemicals that may or may not be able to be removed through conventional means, and then pumping that back down in the ground. And once it mixes with groundwater, there's no real way that we'd be able to remove that. So the potential for problems, I think, is great, and would really need to be careful, especially as we start getting into nanotechnology and other things that, we haven't been responsible with plastics. How are we going to be responsible with nanotechnology and pumping that back in the groundwater underground? It's something to talk about, but it's something I am concerned with.
So there are some elected officials here this evening, and we appreciate that, both municipalities as well as state senators. So there is a question about what is the best way, and how are we conveying this information to our elected officials, and how are they responding?
So that is what the WRAP is all about. The Water Resources Action Plan is designed to help municipalities understand the issues and address them. And Dan can talk more about it, but we really want to have greater collaboration between municipalities, the county, and the state and federal agencies. The more data we share, the better understanding that we have for our area. So a lot of the projections are based on data that was drawn from the Joliet and Will County studies. The more we put in, the more locally relevant information is then put into those models, and then we can use that as part of our communication with municipalities. So development and approval of the Water Resources Action Plan and all the past work that we've done, are kind of the first step. Now we would need to amp up the work that we're doing, and the municipalities were really great partners in development of the Water Resources Action Plan. We had public works staff at pretty much every meeting from municipalities. I saw somebody asking about Kane County, and we had public works director from the village of Huntley, I think, at most of our meetings. I think he's one of the people that was identified as the contributor for the WRAP. So a lot of work has been started, but we do have a lot of work to go, and it's going to be communication and developing the tools to better understand our resources. You want to elaborate on that, Daniel or Amy?
I'd just like to add that the elected officials, for us to be able to move forward, move our science into action, are key. When we started really doing water supply planning and some, we did the science for a long time, but in the early 2000s, when we started pushing, we had support from elected officials. Former Mayor Tom Weisner with Aurora, who was heavily involved with the Northwest Water Planning Alliance, really pushed things forward. He actually, before he passed away, went to Joliet and presented everything that I presented time and again, but he's able to communicate it in such an important way, and it means a lot coming from him. So having this relationship with elected officials has been critical, because he got the ball rolling on Joliet, recognizing there was a real issue here and moving forward. He got the ball rolling on a lot of water supply planning initiatives. So the work with elected officials, we certainly want to continue to communicate that and have that partnership. It's critical for us to further our science.
So if you don't mind, there were a couple of questions about Lake Michigan while we were talking about water resources here in our county. Just very quickly, what are the problems of availability of Lake Michigan water, and what percentage of Lake Michigan water can be removed without causing an ecological disaster? For anybody.
I guess I'll take the first crack at that. So, it's a little misunderstanding that there's no way we could ever get Lake Michigan water. So Joliet is outside of the watershed, and the way that they're able to get the water is the city of Chicago, as part of the different agreements, the Great Lakes Compact, the Supreme Court decision, city of Chicago has an allotment of a certain amount of water. Any additional water beyond what they're using, they can sell. And so that's what's being done. So, Village A will have an allotment of water, and they're at a certain capacity above what they're using. They'll sell that to the next town over. Any capacity that town has, then it can sell it to the next town over. Of course, they're jacking the rates up as it goes up and up. But even if we could extend a pipeline to Lake Michigan from McHenry County, it would be economically irresponsible. So it's costing Joliet $1 billion just to build the pipeline, and it's going to cost $1 billion to operate it. And those pipelines are going to have to be maintained and replaced over time. We have a renewable resource for the most part. Our deep aquifers are a challenge, but we have renewable resources in the county. As long as we take care of them, there really would be no need for us to consider putting a pipeline into Lake Michigan. But the costs of that water, I think, would be going up and up and up. And so I don't think it's a very realistic solution. Our best solution is to take care of what we have, treat it with respect, and grow with methods that protect our water resources.
And there was the question about an ecological disaster.
Well,
Lake Michigan.
That is a concern too. So if anything were to happen to Lake Michigan, there's no way that the region could live off of groundwater. Is that a correct statement, Dan?
Yeah, that was actually, there was an old argument that was made by the Water Survey back in the 40s when there was concerns about things like a nuclear attack, that if that contaminated Lake Michigan, save the sandstone for that, that's past the point of ever being a possibility. May not have been, it certainly wouldn't be a possibility with population as it is now. But yeah, so those things were actually considered even a long time ago. But yeah, the sandstone wouldn't be a sole source.
Yeah. So if anything were to happen to Lake Michigan, that would be problematic. And so there are issues, concerns about drilling for oil in Lake Michigan being a potential contaminant source. Species are probably one of the greatest threats from an ecological standpoint. I don't know that the withdrawal of water for drinking water is necessarily the greatest challenge, but there are challenges to Lake Michigan. The invasive species that are coming in are having greater and greater impacts. So first we had zebra mussels, now we've got quagga mussels, and who knows what's coming next. So I'd say invasive species are one of the concerns, but I don't know that withdrawals for drinking water is the primary concern at this point. But that's something I think you'd want to look at somebody who actually specializes in the Great Lakes for that type of an answer. Cynthia?
So, yeah, one last question here, and it's kind of a big one. When is the time to hit the panic button?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think it requires everything that the three of us talked about here to kind of be put into a cohesive story. And one of the most important things that has to happen is having folks work together on this, because nobody can really solve it by themselves. So I know that's not really an answer. When is that time? Is once these pieces are put together and kind of put into a whole story and getting some feedback. So what I find that helps me is talking with water operators, talking with elected officials, talking with farmers, and finding out the issues they have, what's manifesting, what are the issues that they're seeing, what data do they have. So there's work to be done before we can come up with something conclusive enough to say what that date would be. But it's not. When I say that it's not time to panic, I do think it's time to put our heads together and get this story and get some collaboration going to build together a better understanding of how all these different moving pieces all come together.
Scott, final thought before we close up at 8?
Okay, yeah, and I think we'll be cut off and turned into pumpkins if we don't finish this up. You know, all the challenges that we're talking about are very real, and as are the solutions. You got a lot of people really working hard on this. You know, we've got an organization that the three of us up on the screen are part of, which is the Northwest Water Planning Alliance. And so, you know, the data sharing and thinking minds that are part of that really are looking at solutions to all these problems. And then the Northwest Water Planning Alliance has an executive committee that is composed of elected officials. So that is, you know, a direct conduit between, you know, those of us on the more technical side and the decision makers. So, you know, more collaboration through that organization and others are going to be key. Our Water Resources Action Plan is a tool for everybody to use. It really covers just a tremendous cross-section of water resource issues. I tried to use, you know, plain English wherever I could, and you know, make it, you know, if I can read it and understand it, you know, it's you know, written pretty simply. You know, we're going to have this online. We're still waiting for the final edits to the printed copy to be done. As soon as that's done, we are going to put it online. You can go online right now to McHenryH2O.com and see the draft version. And then we're expecting to have the final published version up on our website in about 2 weeks. So I will send out an email to everybody when that's finalized and up. But we really want people to use this. And so keep an eye out for it, and, you know, use the resource. We'll try and make it as simple for people to use when we put it up online, but it's something for all of us to use. So with that, I just really want to thank everybody for participating, especially all of those who stayed to the end. And let's try and make something good happen out there. We've got the resources at our hands, and I think with the turnout tonight, it shows that we've got the will to do something good. So let's do something and enjoy ourselves while doing it. So thanks a lot, guys.